What I'll focus on here today, I have about 92 slides. I'll go through these relatively quick. There's obviously a lot of pictures. I am a member of the Illinois Emergency Services Management Association. And so with that organization, when we have a disaster in Christian County, by mutual aid agreements, we bring in other managers. And we fill positions inside the Emergency Operations Center in finance, logistics, operations, or planning. So with that, though, we also go interstate, obviously. And this is one of those cases where that happens. So when we initially received our orders, they come through relatively quick. And in this case, it was an 8-hour, by the way, let's go. Okay, so it was challenging for me that day when I received the call because I had to make a presentation to the city council. And my chief was actually on a fishing trip. So it was an issue there. But through some frantic meetings and phone calls, I was able to go on the trip. So what they would do through the state, through the Illinois Emergency Management Agency, they would do a call down list and say, "Are you available for a 16-day deployment?" And I was happy to be available. So that's how we got to go. So we knew right off the bat that we had a 12-member team, we had a 16-day deployment, and then that we should be prepared for a harsh environment. And that was really the orders that we were given. So as emergency manager that's on this team, we are obligated then to have what we call a go bag. So we literally just get on and go. So we have a new check-in system that we're using, and this just goes through the different steps, but there's a 4-step process. And being a state government, we had an issue at the end. So these are some of my peers that I went with. We had an initial briefing to tell us exactly what our duties would be inside the New York City Emergency Operations Center. Unfortunately, they were a little hesitant on letting us taking those photos inside the New York City Emergency Operations Center. But what this is here, this is our last safety briefing prior to deploying out. This is the Emergency Operations Center in Springfield on Dirksen Parkway. So state disasters are controlled from this building. And this building really fell short of what they had in New York City. They had a fantastic location there. So we went through all the different steps to get to that area. And we were literally getting ready to go, and what this picture is, we're waiting. And what we're waiting for, my emergency management agency that I control in Christian County is accredited, which means we have to have a lot of different things in play with that. And so we've been accredited since I took over in, whatever that was, 2004, 2003. And so, but they didn't have record, they didn't have a hard copy of some of the files that we had with some of the classes our members had taken. Because they didn't have that piece of paper, they said, well, we're putting operations to stop. So as silly as that sounds, we had to go back and put an additional 4 hours onto our deployment on the back end, simply because we didn't have a paper copy of a class certification, which we're all happy because we were certified. So, but it was a little aggravating because we had a 16-hour drive on the first day, obviously. So there we are, and we went on a team of, I believe, 6 vehicles. And these are just some obscure shots we took off. When our first morning was in Prattville, this is actually my boss, Di Esma, Lee Shannon, and then our secretary there. The state mandated that we do stop overnight because we knew we were working 12-hour shifts and we were broken up into a day and night shift there for 16 days. So what we did not know, though, is I'll just point out too, real quick. This is I became pretty close friends with this gentleman here. We actually share a commonality. He's also emergency manager for Mount Vernon. He's also assistant fire chief, so we got to hook up and bond there. But as we were sitting here waiting for the hotel, we were finding out and getting intel that gas was very, very hard to come by in New York City and in Pennsylvania, and we weren't aware of that. So what we wanted to do outside of Frankfurt was to try and get fuel. Well, there was no fuel to be found even east of Allentown. So that put another 2 hours to our trip, that we saw lines of fuel that were stretched for literally miles, and they were all governed and enforced by law enforcement. Okay, so, but what was quite interesting is we were going out, even beginning in Indiana, we saw convoys in this order going out with generators, tree trimming businesses such as these. And then we saw the power companies going out. And these convoys were 20, 30, 40, 50 vehicles in length. And so there's a few slides of that to see, just kind of get an idea of what the scope of this is. And this is actually the very front end, but these tail off, quite a ways back behind us. So this is actually the Ameren in Pennsylvania, I believe. This is the Ameren contingent that went out from St. Louis. And then here we are. This is entered the city. This is actually Jersey City. So, and then of course goes into New York City through Northland. The challenges that we faced once we went to the Emergency Operations Center and received our orders. We were teamed up with teams from Boston and Tennessee and Florida. And they're just great folks. Everyone, obviously has something to provide. And we had great fellowship with them. We got to work with them quite well. For us, though, our greatest challenge was getting into work every day. We stayed at an extended stay hotel right outside the mouth of New Jersey at the Lincoln Tunnel. And by GPS, it was a 6.3-mile drive every day. But the drive itself was 3 hours there, 3 hours back, every day without exception. So that was tough. And the Holland Tunnel, there's essentially two ways from where we were at to get into New York City. That was the Holland Tunnel. The Holland Tunnel, 10 days into it, was still flooded out. It did open up 3 days later. So, and as I shared with Aaron, it was I don't believe I have a picture of it, but what you see over here in the bus lane, every morning there were pylons that were set up to make a dedicated bus lane. So you have these lanes of traffic that were opened, but one lane dedicated for buses only. The buses stretched back for miles upon miles. And in the evening, when we would leave the Emergency Operations Center, all those pylons were gone, and it became just a lane of traffic. So there's an employee somewhere in New York City. His job is to put pylons in the road for mile after mile. How that works out, I don't know. But that's exactly what happened. So quite interesting. This was actually in Hoboken, I believe, getting to where we had to go. But there was a significant presence, obviously, of FEMA and the National Guard. And I'll reference that here in a minute. But this is just an obscure picture that, when we were going to the traffic, a lot of these cars had these bumper protectors. And to say it was challenging, and you know what, the reality is we had to fight for every inch that we were moving into the city. Literally every inch. What made it tough were the buildings in Manhattan when we arrived. First of all, when we arrived in Manhattan, Manhattan was dark. Manhattan had no light. So if you kind of experience in your mind what that would be like, it was quite eerie. So, and ironically, when we went to the logistics center, they had no idea that we were coming from Illinois. So that added an additional stressor amount to it. So, but we noticed though that a lot of these cars had these bumpers, and rightfully so, because you were challenged, and they had lanes that were taken up by vendors and contractors. If you had a 5-lane thoroughfare that would go through the city, one lane would have been blocked by a fuel line, the other lane would have been blocked by vendors and contractors doing work to buildings that were damaged during the storm. So it was tough. Well, a lot of you have been there. Obviously, this is how they park in New York City. So. But that was probably, this one, it was a special. They were $29, $30 a day. So this is if you went near the traffic, we were close to that. That's our way back. That's just the tail end of the space shuttle. But never get closest to the traffic. That's normally covered. You can see on the vertical stabilizer there's actually damage. But food kitchens, obviously, throughout New York and New Jersey, people were struggling, and there's no doubt about it. Even in Manhattan, a lot of potable water. And when we would go back, and we actually work nights, we go back and listen to CNN for a little bit. What was interesting about that, I know there were some challenges trying to get water to folks, and it was just tough getting resources in. And what I could tell you as an absolute is the naysayers, the politicians that were complaining that resources weren't coming in, people weren't working hard enough. They would be challenged to operate a lemonade stand, let alone what in the world was going on in New York City. Such a wide, vast area of damage. So, and this is, you probably have seen this as you're traveling through Manhattan. That's just typical garbage collection. So once we arrived, this is actually a contingency of National Guard folks that I work with. I actually got to know these gals pretty well, our relief and vice versa of the evening and the morning. But this is where they brought us together, and they gave us a briefing to say, okay, here's what's going on in New York City. Here's where we want you to go to. So our initial orders were to go to this building. Well, actually, the first orders were to go in Brooklyn to the logistics center, where all the resources come in and then dispersed out. Then they moved us to the New York City Emergency Management Agency, and this is where the actual emergency operation center takes place. So when Obama came to town, this is where he went. When the governor comes in for a report, this is where he goes. So we were broken up into 2 shifts, and again, we were bonded with other agencies around the country. And my partner was Jim Pitcher, I believe is another picture. I had never met Jim before, and got to know each other quite well because we spent every second with each other. So, but we did have a great friendship that's continued from that. So, but Jim and I's responsibility was to go to what's called the E-Rock. And just to give you an idea of a landmark where this is at, the initial Office of Emergency Management Agency was at the World Trade Center complex during September 11th. Of course, that was destroyed. So now the Brooklyn Bridge is just a bit to the north, right up here where we're at. So as soon as you come off the bridge, here's our location. Jim and I were actually about 4 blocks down that way. So we could literally walk from the Emergency Operations Center down to what's called the U-Rock. And the U-Rock, that location controlled all the shelters for New York City. And the biggest issue that we came across, and I probably need to step back, what these are the sheltering locations that we had after they were condensed down. Because initially we began with 27. Bloomberg decided during day 15, I believe, that he wanted shelters closed and condensed because of elections. The election precincts were at the schools, and the schools then in turn served the shelters. So we had to coordinate moving 7,000 people from various shelters around the city down to 7. And to say that was an issue was certainly an issue. And what you're not seeing here, though, are these what they call annexes. So you have mental health annexes, you have medical annexes, or you have single families, family annexes, or single adults. And we had to bring them all together. And it became an issue about day 26 because we were looking at trying to get resources throughout, and resources were starting to stretch thin. And so with some of the mental health annexes that we tried to manage, it was getting to the point where the patients there were defecating, put them on the walls, and it was just a big mess. And trying to get those things cleaned up, getting cleaning crews around this vast area became a real issue for us. And what's interesting about this, these are the plans that we had to become familiar with literally as soon as they walked in the door. And what they told us at the shelter control was, had this been Hurricane Irene, it would have been a non-event because they could manage that. But they were calling this and referred to this as a 100-year storm. So they didn't have, and New York City just doesn't have those kind of storms that they deal with on a routine basis. So knowing that, that's what really caused the problems with the sheltering concerns that they dealt with. So, and you can just imagine if you're trying to shelter 30,000 people, all those folks need some type of help. So that was my guess. I became very familiar with over time. We certainly did not overlook pets. Pets are a big concern. We learned that at Katrina how important those things were. So we had a lot of pet issues that we had to try and manage. Obviously not the best picture, but you can see the traffic that was back there was just very, very hard to understand and comprehend unless you're able to see it. This is an example of battery tunnel. Holland Tunnel did the same issue. This is one example of hundreds that we saw moving towards our hotel out of the Lincoln Tunnel. And this is just a typical fuel line. And this went for miles this way and miles that way. But people just waited. And each one was guarded by National Guard and NYPD because they've had issues. You probably saw those in the media. So obviously just an overview of where things are located here. But we were down initially in this area right here. We were moved, well, south of Manhattan is where we ended up eventually. These are, when we moved from I guess it's the last 4 days that we were there, we were moved out to the Rockaway Islands. And this is the area that was really bad by the storm. We saw this quite often in the news right now. And what our position was then was to be operations managers and to manage task force. And what a task force is, it's a group of resources that goes out and does a single task. So our job here was to coordinate the ambulances that really came from all over the United States. And we would match them up with FDNY folks and National Guard and NYPD, and we would go check the welfare of people that were stranded in the buildings. And just an immense area, but there were hundreds of these type of buildings right here. So we had to take these people, get them together, mesh them together, and literally go check door to door, make sure everyone's in good shape. If they needed water, if they needed medicines, basic needs, those kind of things. So Again, the National Guard had a fantastic representation here. This is just a typical morning briefing. We were given our initial action reports to see who we were with and going out. Again, this is Chief Steve here, and he served as operations manager on this day. So, and this is what they would go out and do, literally. And so you can see where they would park in and just go in and literally just check out the houses, because there was no power here, no power whatsoever. And there was tens of thousands of people that needed help. These are, and I wish I had a video of the landfill that came from this, but very hard to imagine. You get an idea of what the scape looked like here. But this is just one of the pictures of the boardwalks, and we did have probably a 3-hour period that we got to go out and actually see some of what was out there. And so when they talk about the boardwalk was lost, well, you can see obviously right there. Of course, the Atlantic Ocean's right there to your left, and then Rockaway Islands are in the back. Just another picture of the devastation of that. And what was interesting about this, the sand that was there, and you kind of see how it sandblasted some of these buildings, some of the higher rises here, but they had 40,000 vehicles that were destroyed. 40,000 vehicles they had to attempt to mitigate and move out. Okay, so and this is just down one particular street that we just happened to go down, but this was block after block after block, mile after mile. And the sand that you see, it seemed to us to be more like snow, the way they were trying to move it around. And it was just really something to see. And of course, you'd have areas like this where the cars were pushed up into the aisles. But on Rockaway Beach here, they had, again, a large amount of fires that the FDNY had to try and combat without an established water supply. So you can imagine how challenging that was for them also. And this, of course, doesn't really give you an idea of what it truly looked like. But this was, once upon a time, their primary downtown area that they lost. So I thought that was a neat crane, actually. With that crane, what they were doing was building a new substation. So what was interesting about that, they were not replacing, they were not renovating anything. They were replacing roads. They were replacing infrastructure. They would not dig and replace a partial sewer line or cable line. They would just replace, because a lot of this infrastructure was well over 100 years old anyway. So if you can imagine how long that would take to go ahead and dig all that out, excavate all that, and then put new infrastructure and then lay the road down. So many of these donations that people were bringing in had to be thrown away. Okay, so they just didn't have the means and resources to be able to distribute those out, unfortunately. So this is a very common occurrence, daily meals that we're having out for, I mean, you can imagine just one building like that, let alone multiply that by hundreds. And these are the people that needed the help. Okay, so this is one small example of some of the snow news that we would call it. But of course, this is just sand. So and you can imagine in the roadways here, of course, the gutters were clogged up. The water that they were trying to move down would not go anywhere. So the folks really were just having a heck of a time. We wondered what happens to the sand. Does it go back on the beach? What happens with that? Well, what happens is, and of course you have to imagine miles in either direction, the contractors would come in and actually put the sand through a sifter like this to get all the large debris out. Then the sand would actually go back onto the beach. Okay, so we just pull pictures of it. But if you just kind of get your mind, this is hundreds of acres. It's not a small area by any measure. So.
How do those boats get there? The water or the
the water. In fact, one of the they had. I wish we had taken a photo of it. Our claim to fame when Jim and I arrived, we had gone to the Mobile Emergency Operations Center in the Rockaway Islands, and to get in Rockaway Islands, you would come through Manhattan and then Manhattan and Brooklyn, I should say, and then. There was 4 lanes getting in. Well, the USS Minnow, as someone spray painted on, they were sitting in the middle of that 4-lane highway, and it sat there from day one. So, and no one, it was stuck in the okay, so legal didn't want anything to do with it. Well, we knew one particular evening that our contingency was sitting at what we call the podium of the Emergency Operations Center. Said, listen, you're going to play God for us tonight. We're going to save the day because we need a heavy crane. We need a permit. We need to get this boat out of the way. And by the end of our 12-hour shift, the boat is gone. The traffic is flowing. So that's our one minor contribution to all of this. So, but again, obviously, just you can take as many pictures as you want, but it's hard to. It's really hard to understand what you're seeing here until you actually get to see it. So very hard to wrap your arms around that. And I thought this is a very telling photo. So that's all the transportation was just gone. So debris storage sites. I did have a video. Unfortunately, I was looking for that earlier. I thought I had that with me. This is the debris that they were tasked on moving out. Okay, and this is just a very small portion of it. And what they had to do, what you can't see around, there was actually a berm that they had to build around this area here because the hazmat that was inside of here. And this went for acres this way and acres this way. And this is the same initial staging area. When the trade towers went down, they were brought here for the forensics. And so this was, for the most part, a National Guard operation. However, they didn't have a lot of extra contractors that came in. But the issue is it did have to be sorted. So you had just regular wood waste, and you have what they call the white waste, or over in this area, the appliances, building construction materials, and hazardous materials. So it wasn't, as if they were just dumping it into an area. They had to separate all that out. And it was a big operation. And we never heard exactly what was going to be the end result of that, but we believe a lot of that wouldn't cause an environmental issue. They're going to load on tugs and actually take out the ocean and dump. So we understood. So, but just more pictures of that. So, again, not the best representation here, but it was quite something. This is actually on the last day. We were actually taking videos of the landfill area on an overpass. And of course, there's helicopters flying around all the time, never ending. But this one sounded different. So I was actually facing this way, shooting the landfill. And we turned around and we saw the 3 helicopters, one of which, this could have been Air Force One or Air Marine One, or this one of the 3. And there was actually the 3 that had flown by. But that was the day that Obama actually did his walk around, if you will. So, but this is our second home away from home at one of the New York City Emergency Operations Centers. And these are fantastic centers on wheels, but these came very short supply for us. So when we ran the Rockaway task force, we actually ran that from a pickup truck. That's all we had available to us for us to do that. So. And the next few photos are just photos I took. We really didn't have any time for sightseeing, but if you haven't been to the Trade Center to see the memorial, I certainly recommend that you do that. It's a thrilling place to see. No differently, I think that everyone should visit Washington, D.C. I think the same thing can be said about the New York City Trade Center. It's just a fantastic place to see. That, of course, is the new Freedom Tower that's going up. And just the view of the skyline. Every morning that we came across to see the skyline, and this, by the way, is the, if you haven't been there, this is the actual memorial. And, of course, building all around it. And this is one of the footprints of one of the buildings that was lost, and these are acre-sized areas. So a beautiful park, and it's just especially as it comes from the fire service, it's just great to see that. And everyone obviously was very respectful. But when you saw when I would see you're not going to come through. Obviously beautiful at night, but I think to myself, well, when we go to Chicago, we see that skyline, how nice that is. But this was, Chicago skyline squared, really. It was just that large. And you think, well, okay, here's the Empire State Building, but then you see nearly on there the high-rise, or the Horizon Trade, the Freedom Tower. So really awesome to see all that. And I apologize for the pictures, but this is our team in total. And I do think we made some amount of difference in the small picture of things where we were at. But seeing those kind of things certainly made an impact on us. A lot of things that we learned there we're bringing back with resource management because they did have some true issues. One of the issues that we really struggled with the most probably was if we, for example, had to send a care pack, and a care pack would contain, well, let's say, for example, child care. You have the formula, and the diapers, the clothing, and everything else. Those, we would know that we would be sent out, but we never knew if they actually received those yet. Sometimes we had to wait a couple of days to get that word back. So we had to develop a system to be able to track that